When the first Ni No Kuni came out, Ni No Kuni Wrath of the White Witch, we had not really had a JRPG that really was modern, but still had those classic elements in a JRPG. And it was a really good game all at the same time. And when Ni No Kuni came out, the original one, it changed the game. It honestly did. And even though the game was not perfect, it was super close to being perfect. It's that close to being a perfect game. There were only a couple things that were totally fixable that totally made that game a perfect game. But because of that, it still was a great game, and then people loved that game. And still people love that game to this day. Even though we're in a new generation of hardware, people still love the original Ni No Kuni Wrath of the White Witch. And so when they announced Ni No Kuni 2, now known as Ni No Kuni 2 The Revenant Kingdom, lots of people were excited about this game, and the potential was there to make that game the perfect game that wasn't there before them. But does it live up to those high expectations? Welcome to my review of Ni No Kuni 2 The Revenant Kingdom. For all my reviews, they will be spoiler free, and not to worry about those that want to talk spoilers. I'll always have an accompanying video to this one called Spoiler Talk, and you can look forward to that either later this week or next week. And when we get to that spoiler talk, we can talk about anything and everything when it comes to the game. And trust me, there is plenty to talk about. My notes are insane for the spoiler talk version of this video. And even my regular review for this one has insane notes just because there's so much in this game, so much to talk about. But for this video, please do leave your comments spoiler free and leave those spoiler comments for this for the spoiler talk video that will be out later. So, getting right to it. This story takes place, and it doesn't say specifically where it takes place, but you can kind of generally tell it's been hundreds of years since the first game happened, and where there is a half cat, half man boy named Evan, who is in the middle of a coup. Where he's being overthrown for the throne he's about to take over in Ding Dong Dell. And during that coup, you meet a man that has been transported from another world into this one, and Evan and him decide to help each other out, and in the end, kind of they make it out, and basically what happens is Evan wants to create his own kingdom, and so the man that has been transported with him is going to help him along the way. He wants to create a place where you can, quote-unquote, live happily ever after. Now, I have to say, for the first game, it had such an amazing story and it had such an amazing hook. And it was because it was using the connection between a boy and his mother. And I mean, go play the first Ni No Kuni. It's amazing. And the story about you trying to save your mother is a true quest that has you emotionally gripped from start to finish. And it has you hooked so soon that it's just truly amazing of the story in that game. It touches you emotionally, it grabs you, and it pulls you in and just says, hang on for this crazy ride, and join him on that ride. But in this one, it's very different. It's a good story. It's just not emotionally charged like that first Ni No Kuni game. And to be honest, I thought that's kind of the route they were going to go with this game. So when I got the story, I was a little surprised. And at the same time, it takes a while for you to kind of get the story to kind of hook you. It takes about 3 to 4 hours. There's a point in the game where you get about 3 to 4 hours in. There's something that happens that hooks you and finally goes, okay, now I'm into this. Now I'm invested. And I think the problem is because of this coup that was taking place in the very beginning of the game, it didn't allow an opportunity for you to really establish characters, really get to know the characters. All of a sudden, you're just thrown into this and expected to move and understand where these people are coming from, but you really don't. But by the end of the story, you really do capture and understand, and really the characters themselves are truly fleshed out and really well done as characters. I just think that it would have been easier maybe if they did something, whether they added more to the beginning that can get you more hooked onto to the characters that starts, or just change the beginning altogether and find a way to get you more invested in the characters to start, because going into it and gain 3 to 4 hours into the game until you get hooked on the characters is really a hard thing to do and ask of players. But to be honest, this game is 40 hours long, if not more. So compared to that overall process, it's a very small amount of time, but people are definitely going to be turned off by this game if they're not hooked in the very beginning. And unfortunately, this doesn't have the good hook that the first game had. Unfortunately, but the game has so many surprises, and we'll talk about a lot of them in the spoiler talk. There's also small Easter eggs that are kind of in the first game where if you didn't play the first game, it's not going to ruin the game for you. It's not required of you to play it. They touch on some elements from the first game, but it's really more of Easter eggs and just to have a better understanding of the world that's around you. And you can really tell from playing the first game of how much time has passed. So you can really understand that perspective there. And it just really, finally about the story, I just want to say, it just really surprised me that it just wasn't emotional. And I know I mentioned that just a minute ago, but I really want to emphasize that the first Ni No Kuni was such an emotional story that it felt like that was its kind of base in regards to what the franchise truly is. And when they didn't go that route in this game, it was truly surprising. But regardless of my expectation of that happening, there just wasn't a good enough hook in the beginning until that 3 to 4 hour mark where something happens where you're like, yes, I'm in it for the long haul. Let's do this. This is interesting. Let's see what happens. So again, it takes a little bit, but it's worth the wait. I promise. And this is really interesting for this game. It's kind of what I call, it literally has 3 different games rolled up into one. And it's 3 completely different elements, yet somehow these 3 elements perfectly work together to really help strengthen each other and makes the game worth the time that you spend on these 3 elements. And we'll go over each of the 3 elements one by one. First is the JRPG elements of this game. And they take classic elements from the JRPG. So this is open world, story quests, side missions, and the side missions really range from fetch quests where you actually have to go somewhere and get an item, and there's probably enemies in the way in the process of getting that item, or you might already have claimed the item on your way there, because there are a lot of items in this game. Lists of items, and we'll go over kind of the reason why that happens later on in this review. But you do that. There's bounty missions where you have to go eliminate a certain monster out of the way. And then there's a cool little special side mission that's just one by itself that is it's kind of challenge dungeons in a sense. That's kind of cool and kind of fun, and it kind of mixes up the gameplay and really helps you level up when you need to really level up quickly. It's a good opportunity to test out your fighting skills in the process. So it's really cool in that sense. So there's that element. And they also include deep spells, items usage. And when I mean items, I talked about there's a lot of items, but there is a true throwback to older RPGs on just how many items you're collecting. When I was playing this game, I literally felt at the beginning, at first, before I hit, even in the 3 to 4 hour mark, not just the story grabs you, but all the elements kind of come together then. And I kind of, before those 3 to 4 hour mark, was just I'm collecting a lot of items. In the first Ni No Kuni, you weren't collecting this many items, but you were collecting a lot of items in this game. And I was just like, what is the point of these items? I don't understand. Why are they just everywhere and they keep appearing? And I keep getting them. And truly, once I got deep down into the true mechanics of the game, which we'll talk some more about it later, is they really truly made sense. And I go, that totally makes sense. I now understand why I was grabbing that many items as I was going throughout the game. There is a purpose for having these many separate items. It totally makes sense in the end. But you're just running around. And the one cool thing I do have to say in regards to the JRPG elements, it truly throws a throwback to the classics in the way you explore around the map. Now you have the towns and the cities that's in real scale of your height and the height of the buildings, but then when you go on to the world itself, it's a perfect meld of the old-fashioned JRPG where you are kind of, it's kind of like you put a map out and you have a little figure and you just put them on the figure and you kind of move them around, but it's moving in real time in an actual action like a character. But it's just kind of cool. That kind of cool throwback is very interesting. And that's how you kind of initiate battles and those kinds of stuff as well. Find nooks and crannies. A lot of chests are in this game, and that is fun for me because I love opening chests and finding a lot of treasure in them. So that was really cool. Now the second element that's in this game, and I almost could say the second game that's in this game, is you have an army and you're fighting other armies. And so you're commanding the army. There's different types of armies, and it basically is kind of like a strategy board game in a sense, but in real time, where you're going up and battling a certain type of army, and your point is to wipe them out. Basically, that's the whole point of it. And you're kind of leading the middles. You're in the middle, and you have these, and you have four different types. So you can have like archers, gunmen, soldiers with hammers, soldiers with swords, mages, those kinds of things. And you can mix how you want to put people in. There's a lot more different types, but you have four of them, and they surround you, and you can kind of move where the position they are around you. But basically, you just kind of push them all at them and let them battle each other. It's a cool little fun side mission in a sense, but still fun game. It has some strategy in it because it's a formulaic, like rock, paper, scissors. A certain enemy type is going to be strong against another enemy type. It's going to be more effective. So using those elements is really fun and a good part of the game. I actually really enjoyed them. And you're playing about I did this element about 7 times, but that's not, I didn't do all the opportunities that were offered to me to use the armies. There is probably, maybe 10 more that I didn't do. And so the fact that there's such a deep element there that you can do if you want to, but it's not 100% required of you to do everything. That's what's really important, and that's what they do really well. It's really the final thing I want to say, there is a quite clever thing they do with the game at the end involving this type of game mechanic that I won't explain. We'll talk about it in the spoiler talk, but it truly feels like it was a true evolution of what you were doing there, and it finally made sense of like, why are you doing this so many times? Even though I'm not like saying that it was bad that I was doing this so many times, because it was quite enjoyable. It was just like, it was all leading up to this, and it made total sense. So now the final thing, the final game within the game that of the 3 elements is your kingdom. Now in your kingdom, it's really cool because you are actually literally growing your kingdom as you are building your kingdom in this game. And it reminds me of an app phone game, but yet it's combining elements of a real RPG game that affect that game. And I'll talk you exactly what I'm talking about in just a second, but I just want to say it's very addicting and super fun. I found it amazing and fun to play. But basically, you earn money for your kingdom, and you use that money to build yourself shops, resource gathering, resource gatherers, or creating resources, shops and buildings. And after a certain amount of time, as you build more buildings, you accumulate more money in a certain amount of time. And so after about 30 minutes to an hour of me playing outside in the world, not touching my castle, coming back to my kingdom, I can claim all the money that's been made and put it in the bank, and then I can spend it if I want to, and use it to make more buildings, or you can use it to pay to conduct research. Now, when you build a building, some buildings offer to conduct research. So an example would be a spellcaster building. You can submit them to do research to find how to level up higher level spells, and you kind of have to do it progressively. So you have to do the lower level spells first, then they got to learn how to do the next level spells. And it's quite interesting, quite fun, and every piece of research that you do affects it in some way, not just the actual like kingdom building, it affects you as the character as well. So you can go to that shop, learn higher level spells from them, or you can, if you do it with a smith, a blacksmith that builds your weapons, they can have better weapons for you when you go talk to the blacksmith, which potentially they will have better weapons than all the shops in the game will have for you, which gives you quite an incentive to really push on investing in those buildings and investing in those people. Now, I want to say that the money that was coming in, it was really hard for me to choose consistently, as even though I was constantly getting money in, it was really hard for me to decide where to spend my money because I didn't have enough to spend it on everything. And it shows how great of an economy it is. And it's kind of, in a sense, a way to kind of level yourself up in a sense, because you have to decide where you're going to spend your resources. And if you're a building that builds resources and doesn't spend money, you claim items of resources. So that could be food, that could be string, quill, string, wood, those kinds of items. And those items come in later. When I talked about earlier about how you're getting all these items, well, you'll be using these items to either create things, make things, and sometimes you have to give it to people for side quests, which we'll talk about in a second. But it showed how well the economy was in this game, that truly I wasn't having too much money, that I didn't have somewhere to spend it. I felt I didn't have enough money, which made me have to make a smart decision on strategically where I want to put my resources towards. What do I want to research? What do I want to build to help make my adventure easier and help build my character? Now, the final part about it that makes it very different, and where I said it kind of combines the elements of the JRPG and the actual game you're playing with this kind of mobile-esque kind of mini game in a sense. And that is, instead of the side quests just being like regular side quests, most of them are recruitment for side quests. And so these buildings are empty and you're a new kingdom. So you have to find people that want to live in your kingdom. So when you do side quests, a lot of the times after you complete that side quest, they will choose to go into your kingdom and be in your kingdom. So to bring in those resources, to be able to have those shops up and running, you have to have people in them. And so that is what the side quests are meant for. The side quests are meant to bring the people in so that you can put them in the building areas, so that they can run those areas and be able to create the resources that you need. The nice thing about that is that at the same time, some of these people have specialties. And even though you can put them anywhere, regardless of what their specialty is, which is great. That's what I really liked about it, because it would make you feel very restricted on being able to put people where you need them for resources. Now, you're not going to get a minor boost in certain areas if you're not putting them in their specialty, but that's okay. Until you build that building, then you can transfer them over to that building later on. And you could put more than one person in one building, which increases the time. Increases how short the research time it's going to take to research a certain thing, which is super fun. And it just really, truly made you feel like you're building a kingdom, a true kingdom for the future. And not all of the side quests are like that. Some of them are just general side quests where you get really nice items out of them. But most of them are recruiting people. And with all these elements all together, they really do work well together. And eventually, in each part of the story, they do take a important piece of the game. And so you can't ignore one of these elements, or else you are doing a disservice to yourself and you're going to have to spend more time trying to I can't really explain without spoiling stuff, but you need to focus on all three elements. And the game does a really good job on making you, allowing you to manage your time on organizing those on those stuff. So once I complete a main mission, there's a bunch of side missions that open up, and I can do all the side missions, recruit my people. In that sense, when recruit my people, then I can do a couple army battles after that, and then go back to the main quest. It's kind of a good flow of rotation, and it's not too much to where, like, by the end of it, I didn't have my full kingdom. Like, I didn't have all the buildings, I don't have all the people, but yet I still was able to complete the game with the requirements that was required of me in the building part of the game. I still was able to finish the army stuff without doing every single army thing that was available for me. And I didn't do all the side quests. So it was a really good balance where it felt like I was not overwhelmed by too much stuff, but it did offer a good mix of different things where I didn't feel like I was spending too much on one thing and not enough on other things, which the story is great. So I don't want to take away from the story, because the story is really great. And I want to spend time in the other elements, but I don't want to spend too much time on the other stuff too. So it just made a lot of good opportunities in that. Now, the combat system. This is completely changed from the first game. And I would say it is for the better this time around. I would say the first game had a system that I would say, if Pokemon wanted to come to a main console, they should take the system from the first game. I've personally said that to a lot of people, and I didn't have the channel running when the first game came out, so I've never ever got to say it on this, but I truly believe that. And if you agree with me or you disagree with me, let me know in the comments below, because I'd love to have that conversation. But that first game truly was a Pokemon game that wasn't a Pokemon game. That Pokemon needs to copy that combat system because it was so good. But for this one, you are no longer fighting with creatures fighting for you. You are fighting yourself. You yourself are going into the battlefield with a weapon and fighting. And it was a cool difference, because it was a very button mashy type game for a JRPG. So you had like a light attack, and then you had a heavy attack. And they were good fighting mechanics. They also had dodging, and then if you time your blocking right, you take less damage. It's a really cool combat system, and it really was fun to play. Live action, it was super good and super fun. And you also do use magical attacks, which is part of kind of the JRPG trope. Usually JRPGs are mostly turn-based. There are some similar to this combat system, but there's not as many as like the standard classic JRPG. But for this one, you do have magic attacks, and they kind of they range in actual like spells, or they range in like melee special attacks, those kinds of things. And to fill up that magic gauge, you either are landing blows with your regular light attack or heavy attack, or you're giving yourself certain items. Noting about the items, get a lot of items, give yourself some items that's going to give you more magic points to be able to use in the game. And I truly felt like it was really responsive, it was really fun, and I felt more like a fighter in this game than I did in the last game. The last game I felt like I was more like a puppet master, and I don't necessarily liked that kind of combat. It wasn't as fun for me, but I really dig this one. This one is high flying, fun, and it really worked. Yes, battles are repetitive. That's what happens with every single Japanese RPG game that you do play, and this is no different than those. But the combat system is fun enough where it's not as much as a down than it is an up in this game. Now, I have to talk about these things called higgledies. Now, not only do you have the two comrades, usually you have a party of three, so you have yourself and then two comrades that you can choose that fight with you, but there's also these small creatures, and you get four groups of them, and when I mean groups, they're literally groups of them. So it's not just four individual ones, they have the kind of their own posse along with them, and they look like little Pikmin from a Nintendo franchise. It's just these small little creatures, and I'll put some up on the screen. But the higgledies, you can use them for combat, and they're super fun to use. They all have their own kind of types, and they can either do healing, status effects on opponents and yourself. They also can use them as attackers, and it's kind of cool. They kind of mash up together at a certain moment, and then you can go up to them and kind of give them a command to be able to say, hey, help me out with this, and they can either heal people when you're in their circle, or they'll bring out a cannon and start shooting people with their cannon. And it's a fun, unique way to adding a little bit extra strategy to the game, and being able to make it a little bit more, when I said high flying, that's another element of the high flyingness, and they are super great and super fun to play with. But they are not required to use in battle. I mean, you could win battles without them, but they're great. It helps make battles easier. It also makes it more manageable in battles, especially if you're not as leveled. If you're lower leveled and you're going against a higher leveled opponent, it's nice to use the higgledies to your advantage. And it just also adds another layer of strategy to how you attack your opponents, which is fun. I like that. I like when you can add more layers, but yet not have to use them. And this is what's so wonderful about this game, is they have a lot of things that are great, and they don't force them upon you to say like you have to do all of it. You can do some of it, and that's all you have to do. And then you can choose if you want to do more of it, which is so great. That's what's so great about this game. And then the last thing I want to let you know is the first game is known for being extremely difficult. You are usually extremely underleveled. You have to do a lot of side missions. You have to do a lot of what is we call grinding, and that's typical in JRPGs, is grinding of like going out to battle and just fighting a bunch of battles to level yourself up high enough to be able to go take on more story-based stuff. I want to say that this game is so much better with it. It's not as overpowering with your opponents being more powerful than you are. There is a moment where I ran into where I felt underpowered, and that was about a little over 3/4 of the way through the game. But there are plenty of opportunities to level back up. So I had some side quests I could still do, which I still had to do anyways because I had to focus on my kingdom. So that's kind of how perfect these things work together. The side quests kind of help you level up so that you stay on level, and you're not doing a lot of them. There are hundreds of side quests, and I had to only do, I think, 50, and not all of them are fetch quests. Some of them are like, do you have these items? And because I picked up everything, I got the items, so I just give them to them, and that's it. Very simple, and I get a person, and that works perfect. There's also a really cool, like that side quest I talked about that has dungeon-like-esque, where it's mainly combat focused. I use those to kind of level up as well, and they offered a fun challenge and helped me really understand the combat system even more. And there's just opportunities for where you can level up, where it's not just feeling like you're grinding, you're actually doing something more than just grinding, which is great. That's what you want in any game. You don't want to just grind to grind. You want to have purpose for grinding or doing something like that. But it just worked perfect, and it was a happy marriage. Now, one thing I do have to talk about in regards to bosses, because I can't. There's bosses are mainly spoiler stuff. So in regards to this game, so I'm not going to talk about much of the bosses, but I will say that they are unique, fun, and they offer new strategies that you don't use in regular battles, which makes them more fun to play and much more interesting in regards to combat. So it doesn't feel like in the first Ni No Kuni game, your opponents, there really wasn't much in strategy. You just had to defend at the right time, and then you would attack all out. Here, you actually have other elements that I can't talk about. Oh, it's bugging me. But there's things there's things that they do that offer a new strategy, and it's a very fun to do, and it makes the bosses more interesting overall in the end. I just want to make a very small note on the enemies. They offer quite a variety. But I wish there was a little bit more in regards to variety when it came to enemies, because I ended up facing the same opponents that I faced at the very, very beginning. I just wish there was a little bit more change up in the elements when it comes to that. But the first game, when I talked about the first game and I talked about how the story was so good, it was so emotional, and it hooked you. And it's because of the incredible voice acting that first game had. And it just sold you. And just the acting was great, flat out awesome. For this second game, the voice acting is also incredible. It is great. The only issue I have is there's not very much of it. Compared to the first game, there's probably half as much voice acting than there was in the first game. And there were literally scenes where I was slightly frustrated, and it wasn't because of it was a bad thing. It was like, I just want more of it. That's all. And it was like, you start with, when you go up to somebody, text will appear of what they're saying to you. And then all of a sudden there will be added, in like that same conversation, all of a sudden a voice will start talking as what the text is saying, but it's in-game stuff. And then from there, it will transition into a full-on cutscene with voiceover. And then it goes back to text talk. And it was just like, why? Like if the scene was going to be, if that was going to be the scene, you're going to have a cutscene, you might as well just do a whole cutscene for that part. Like there's no reason why you couldn't do that, especially because you have the incredible voice acting. It just works. And maybe that's why the story didn't make as big of an impact in the first 3 hours, because there really wasn't much in a major cutscene until Well, in the beginning, there are a couple major cutscenes to lead up to that beginning part, but there really isn't just a big cutscene after that until about 3 or 4 hours in, and all of a sudden that cutscene gets you hooked. But the voice acting is incredible, and I just really wanted more of it. I really wanted more. That's all I wanted. And just a small note, the score is amazing as usual. Like, the orchestra is amazing, great compositions all around. The only thing I have to say about it, and it's the same complaint I would say about the first game, is that the score repeats a lot in this game. And it gets slightly to the point, especially when you're spending about 40 hours on a game. The score becomes so repetitive that it is so annoying to listen to sometimes, where you're just like, I've heard this song a trillion times. And for some reason, when I play Persona 5, they play the same songs all the time. Didn't bug me a bit. I don't know why, but just in this example, I don't know, the score seemed to take a bigger I can't really truly explain why, but I feel like just the score was much more noticeable this time around in this one compared to if I played Persona 5. Yeah, I noticed the score. The score is awesome. It's super fun and funky, but that's just not everything. It wasn't a focal point, where here the score really is a big focal point because the voice acting is not really as much there as in the first game. So, but the score is still really, really good, and I really, really liked it a lot. Now, even though I played the first game, because so much time has passed, so much has changed in regards to the world of Ni No Kuni and what takes place in this world, that truly exploring it felt like I was exploring it again for the first time. And because there were so many new things, there were some things that were there from the last game, not very many, and some nooks and crannies, like I said, Easter eggs along the way that were from the first game. But truly, this was a great second visit. And it was great to touch on the new elements that I remember, and I mean, some of the new elements that I've never seen, and some of the old elements that I didn't know. And it truly made this world feel unique, different, but yet still feel like Ni No Kuni, which was quite impressive. Especially, that's very difficult to do, especially if something has passed so many years after. Now, in the end, this game, I will say, just like the first game, it is near perfection. And for me, that is so hard to say because I'm so critical of games. I mean, you see on all my reviews, I have such issues with a lot of things in games that I'm so critical. I mean, even critical on this one, especially with the story. But in regards to bringing a classic JRPG to the modern day, this is the closest you will get to that greatness, just like the first Ni No Kuni. Except I feel like, unfortunately, there in the fixing of the things that were wrong with it, because they fixed a lot of the things that were wrong with the first game, they ended up creating new barriers for themselves that I don't think they were noticing as they were making this game. Example, like with the story of just not having that emotional hook like that first game did have. But I mean, you are going to spend 40 hours, if not more, on this game, and it is truly an enjoyable experience all the way through. And again, like I said, there's a hook 3 to 4 hours in, get to there, and then you can say I give up if you're not really into it after that, but really get to that hook because it's so worth it when you get there. I highly recommend you pick up this game and definitely pick it up. Enjoy it. It is a great game, and hopefully they do make a third game because I would love to see what next they have for that studio. Now, that is my review for Ni No Kuni 2: The Reveling Kingdom. What did you think about the game? Let me know in the comments below. Let's have those conversations. Please do remember to leave these spoiler-free, and look forward to my spoiler talk for Ni No Kuni 2: The Reveling Kingdom. That'll be out either this week or later next week. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and if you want to keep up with the content I release each and every week here on Freeze Frame Rate, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. My name is Mitch. I'm signing off saying, see you soon.